This section is on the French and Indian War. The primary outcome of the French and Indian War is that the French ended up giving up their territory in North America. So the French were now out of the colonization of North America after the French and Indian War. Another thing to remember is that the French and Indian War was not between the French and the Indians. The French and the Indian War was between the French and Indians on one side and the British on the other side. The British, or the English, at this time also included the American colonists. So here's the background. The French claimed the territory from the Appalachian Range to the Rocky Mountains, as in 1682. So that's a big chunk of Central America. Well, not Central America, but the central part of the United States. The main French settlements were along the St. Lawrence River in Canada. So let's just take a quick look at what we're talking about. Okay, so here are the Appalachian Mountains. Here are the Rocky Mountains. So the French claimed all this area in between, so from the Appalachians to the Rockies. And their main settlements were along here on the St. Lawrence River, including Montreal and Quebec, which is a little bit further north. The colony of New France, so the French settlers in the Americas, were about 80,000 in 1760. The British colony's population, however, were more than 1 million, so there were many more British than there were French. One of the primary activities for the Europeans who lived in New France, so in the French territories of the Americas, were to work as fur traders. So that's how they made their money, was acting as fur traders. Now, there were a lot of alliances between Native Americans and Europeans. The English competed with the French for furs, so the main French economic activity was fur trade, and the English wanted to have some of that too. The Native American groups competed amongst themselves to supply furs to the Europeans. So some groups would ally with the French and some with the English. So in particular, the Huron and the Algonquin peoples, Native Americans, allied with the French, and the Iroquois allied with the English. And there were a series of wars between the French and English and their Native American allies. And the final war was the French and Indian War from 1754 to 1763. There was a major conflict in the Ohio River Valley. So let's take a look at where the Ohio River is. Okay, so here's the Ohio River. So there was a main conflict in the Ohio River Valley, and the British fur traders moved into the Ohio River Valley, and the French didn't like that. So they destroyed the village and the British trading post to keep the French out. The French built forts to protect the region. The Virginia colony was upset, and they claimed the region. The French refused to leave, and they captured the English fort, and they renamed it Fort Duquesne. Now, George Washington was the leader of the group that was sent out by the lieutenant governor in Virginia, and he built another fort called Fort Necessity, and he surrendered Fort Necessity to French troops in 1754. The French and Indian War at this time was part of the larger 7 Years' War. This 7 Years' War was a war between Britain and France, and it had worldwide, it was being fought worldwide, not just the French and Indian War in America, although that had the profound impact of having the French give up their American territories. The Iroquois, who traded with the British, refused to ally themselves with the British, so they did not fight on the British side. Benjamin Franklin had a plan to unite the colonies so that the colonies would all act together. And this plan was the Albany Plan of Union, so they would gather resources and taxes and army all together. But the colonial legislatures defeated this plan. the British sent General Edward Braddock and 2 regiments to Virginia, and Braddock and his troops were defeated by the French and Indian troops in 1755. Braddock wanted to use conventional warfare. Washington at this time was saying, maybe we should hide behind the trees and shoot them that way. And Braddock said, no, we're not going to do that. And as you probably recall or will learn later on, that was a strategy of the American colonialists against the British in the Revolutionary War. Braddock was killed, and Washington, although he had several bullet holes in his coat, miraculously survived. Okay, so let's take a look at what we're talking about now. Okay, this was the British territory. This was the French territory. This territory was disputed. And here you can see the locations of the French victories, which are in green, and the British victories, which are in red. Quebec, which was the capital of the New France, so Quebec was the capital of New France, and by 1759 the British controlled 6 French forts, but they were unable to capture the fort at Quebec. Finally, the British troops snuck up a path up a cliff, and then they attacked in the morning. And the British commander James Wolfe and the French commander Montcalm were both killed. But the British defeated the French at the Battle of Quebec, and this was the turning point of the war. So the Treaty of Paris ended the 7 Years' War in 1763. The British won, although again, in terms of the other parts of the world, not really much changed. Britain claimed all of North America east of the Mississippi. So east of the Mississippi. Okay, so here's the Mississippi River. Well, that's the Missouri River, but Mississippi River, and the British claimed all of the territory east of the Mississippi, so all of that. France gave New Orleans and the Louisiana Territory to Spain. So that was another big chunk of North America. Britain gave Cuba and the Philippines to Spain in exchange for Florida. So that ended French power in mainland North America. Now, British settlers began to move into Native American lands. The Native Americans attacked the settlers and destroyed forts, and that was known as Pontiac's Rebellion. The Delaware war leaders came to a conference, and the British officers gave them blankets infected with smallpox. The Native Americans had no immunity to smallpox, and so when they took these blankets back, it caused a major outbreak. The Native Americans then retreated, and the British issued the Proclamation of 1763, which forbids colonists to settle west of the Appalachians, so they could not settle west. And the colonists were angry because they thought they had won the right to settle through the war.